What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. As always, I'm Ari here with Korea. It's kind of our first episode transitioning to some new sports that we haven't talked about in a while. With the NFL season coming down to a close, in the next week, pretty much. How are you doing today, Korea?
Yeah, I'm doing good. You mentioned it. It's just that time of year, where one sport is trending toward ending the regular or the whole season in general. We're picking up mid-season for some basketball, but I'm doing good. Happy February, everyone. Obviously, this is the first February episode of 2023. Also, coincidentally on Jordan Day, obviously 2-3-2-3. So it's a little nugget there, but yeah, I'm doing pretty good. You mentioned it. We're just transitioning. So like we said in the last episode, expect nothing new, just some new content. Obviously with the football season wrapping up, but we're not going to give up on football forever. Obviously, when March comes around, that's when the free agency period opens up, and we already saw some big names potentially be on the move. We saw Tom Brady retire supposedly earlier this week. So, another, great legend in the game is calling it up, hanging it up after a legendary career. So shout out to him and his family and all that stuff. But, as you mentioned, we're going to be switching the content as, the season ends. And, I'm excited to talk about what's going on, what's been happening in the NBA. And, Ari, it's a month away. March is almost here, and that's my favorite month. And March Madness right around the corner. I'm very excited to see what's been going on in the college basketball world.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just kind of get right into the All-Star. We saw the reserves named last night on Thursday and then the starters last week, I believe. So, obviously, as every year, there's some names that were no-brainers, some names that, were surprising. There's snubs, every year this is the case, obviously. I'm just kind of going over the names. The West starters were LeBron, Jokic, Zion, Curry, and Luka. East starters: Giannis, Durant, Tatum, Mitchell, Kyrie. And then last night we had the reserves, the Western reserves: Paul George, SGA, Jaren Jackson, Damian Lillard, Lauri Markkanen, John Morant, and Sabonis. And then the East reserves: Adebayo, Jaylen Brown, DeRozan, Embiid, Halliburton, Drew Holiday, and Julius Randle. Korea, what were kind of your first initial thoughts at these names?
Yeah, I want to go first to the East first. And, kind of the big question is, why is Joel Embiid not a starter? He is one of the leading scorers in the league, and, he has been consistently putting work in. I mean, obviously, it's hard to say, who would you sub out and who would you put in, because that's the conversation we always have around the All-Star game. It's always, okay, you can make the argument for anyone, but who are you going to take them out for? And because of just the level of basketball, that we're seeing right now, it's hard to really say that. But I will say that that maybe Jason Tatum. I don't know. Yes, he's having a great year, obviously, in Boston. He's been doing his thing up there. I think he's averaging like 27 or something, a little over that. But I feel like Joel Embiid has really been a key focus as to why Philadelphia is really, really good this year. Obviously, offensively, yes, they're the third best team in the East, but I mean, when you're averaging 33 and 10, I feel like you kind of have to be a starter, And yes, him not making, yes, he's a reserve, and that's all credit where it's due. He's an all-star. That's great for him. He deserves it. But I feel like he should be a starter. And then once you go down in the East a little more, then you look at the reserves. And, I liked every single one. I liked where they were going. It was definitely a good list. But then I see Drew Holiday's name. And that is a name where I am starting to question, does he really deserve it? Because out of all the reserves, I mean, yes, Brown, I believe Jaylen Brown should be an all-star reserve. I believe that Julius Randle should be a reserve. I believe that, the way Halliburton has been playing, Embiid, of course. And then Bam Adebayo, you can really question that as well, with just how long he's played. And then alongside Halliburton as well, who's been out, but, just came back recently. But then Drew Holiday comes up. And then here's the question: who do you sub in? Well, I definitely would argue maybe Jalen Brunson in a way. He's been doing numbers for that Knicks team. You can even argue Darius Garland. He's having a good year. You can argue James Harden. That's a big name around the NBA that has been floated as a snub. And this happens every single year. And I believe this is
Trey Young as well.
Yeah, and I was about to forget. I knew I was forgetting someone else, like Trey Young. Like that, those are four names out in the East who I believe should be all stars, as was reserves or starters, no matter what the case is. I mean, the fact that Embiid is not a starter is actually ridiculous to me. But, anyways, we always have this issue of, the all-star game, being obviously what it is and how the voting works. The voting is pretty much one of the most flawed systems in all of like the all-star game sports because, you have the MLB, which is pretty flawed because it's more of a fan vote and that's fun and all. And then, the NFL, it's a little bit more fan vote, but also, there's that pretty even line between, who actually deserves to be a Pro Bowler and who actually is a Pro Bowler. And we don't really complain about that much. It's always been the all-star game. The amount of, because it goes by so many categories. You have your media rank, you have your fan rank, and then your coaches rank. And I feel like, that's so flawed because, you have guys like Kyrie Irving who is absolutely hated by the media, but the fans love him so much because of what he does on the court. And, that's just a flawed system of voting. And so the reason we have all these snubs is just because of how bad the voting is. And then you look out west, and the only name that I see that should not be there is Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm sorry. I don't care if this is because I'm a Warriors fan and I hate Memphis. Like, it's not even because of that. I really think Jaren Jackson Jr. is not as good as people think. His numbers are inflated at home. I saw this. There is that, I think, that Reddit post or something where, he's been so much better at home than on the road that it shouldn't be believable. But, there's plenty of guys who should be in over Jaren Jackson. I feel like, obviously Anthony Davis is a big name. He's obviously, we know he's glass. I mean, Anthony Davis is literally full of glass. But, at the same time, Anthony Davis is still one of the best centers in all of basketball. And he has that versatility to where he can shoot from wherever he wants on the court. And then he can get boards and block inside. And I feel like Jaren Jackson is not that same kind of player yet. He's more of the defensive presence instead of more of an offensive presence, in my opinion. And so I think Anthony Davis should be in. I think De'Aaron Fox should be in. That's a big name that I think is missing. De'Aaron Fox has always been that snub. I feel like Sacramento is always kind of like, I feel like the Sacramento Kings are the Seattle Mariners of last year. And I say this because they're playing great basketball, right? They're a small market. They're playing great basketball. Obviously, Sabonis is an all-star, and he absolutely deserves it. Sabonis is one of the best rebounders in the game right now. But, I feel like when you look at, all the players that made it, right, and you see how SGA made it, and SGA, congratulations to him. He absolutely deserves all of that. You look at a Paul George, you look at a Dame Lillard, you see John Morant, you see, all of these big name guys, Lauri Markkanen, who's going to be representing Utah and who's actually having a really good year too. But, it just sucks to see so many good players snubbed every single year. And it's a shame because, I feel like, maybe it's time to really open up the roster a little bit in terms of how many all-star starters and reserves can go. Because, yes, there's so many all-star starters and, good players that make it. But at the same time, like, Kevin Durant, like, that man's been injured for so long. Like, he's not going to play. And so that's the problem when you have all these fan votes and all these, like, player votes. Like, the player vote is ridiculous. I mean, I saw Jay Crowder get votes for an all-star. He hasn't even played. Chet Holmgren, who has not played a single game this season, is getting all-star votes. So it's just another case where, you see these all-stars and you like what they're doing and, you see that they're making it to the game and it's all fun. But then, you see all these snubs and you really feel bad for them. And, you feel like, oh, well, they should make it. And then you have to make the argument of who they should make it against. And it's just frustrating. But, personally, I'm just glad that, the Warriors got one. We got one. I feel like Steph was the only NBA All-Star candidate for this Warriors team, if I'm going off of personally what I've seen. But, hopefully we'll see. I like what they've been doing with this new All-Star system in terms of the scoring and, a little more of a competitive edge. So, out of all the All-Star games in all of Major League sports, I'd say the NBA All-Star game is actually one that I like to tune into because, it's competitive. And yes, the MLB All-Star game is fun, but, everyone tunes in for the home run derby. No one tunes into the Pro Bowl. I mean, did you see? I'm sorry. I'm going on the tangent here. Did you see last night? I mean, that crap looked like the combine. That was an NFL combine. There were no fans. There was no yelling. There was no cheering. It was an NFL combine. And that was garbage. But I digress. But yes, I feel like when you look at the all-star starters, I feel like they got them mostly right from each conference. I mean, the way that Luka Doncic is playing right now, he's an MVP candidate. Jokic, he is, I would say, you can argue Jokic or Embiid as the leader, the front runner of the MVP vote because, Luka, Jokic, he's averaging like 25, I think 11 and 10, and their team is in first place in the West. And then Embiid's obviously averaging 33 and 10, which is ridiculous. So it's going to come back to that debate again between those two. But, I don't really have any big complaints about the starters. I'd say the only one I really question is Zion. But it's more of like a bounce back thing for him. He's definitely had a rough start, and, it was good to see him, get selected as a starter. But yeah, I definitely believe that, this, and plus the way they're going to be doing the teams this year, I like what they're doing as well. If you guys don't know, they are not doing a regular draft like they've done in the past couple of years where they had like LeBron and KD draft players. They're going to do it all the night of. It's going to be like pickup game where you just line up in front of each other and you take turns picking each other. I believe that's what the format's going to be. But yeah, first look at the reserves. I definitely would say that Drew Holiday should not be there, along with Jaren Jackson, and the two guys I would replace them with, whether it's Trae Young, Garland, Brunson, in the East and in the West, Anthony Davis, De'Aaron Fox, some of those guys, I think they should be in. But Ari, I've been going on too long. Do you have any snubs that you think should be reserves or starters, vice versa? And what are your thoughts on the first look of the 2023 All-Star starters and reserves?
I just want to make sure that you can hear me fine because okay. So I definitely agree with you that the voting is definitely like there's no kind of real consistency with like having all three, coaches, media, and fans have a say in it. Like it doesn't make that much sense. I agree with you that obviously the fans and the media and the coaches are all going to have different perspectives, obviously, on who to vote for and all of that. But that's kind of always how it's been for however long now, and that's probably not going to change. There's not really, that much of a point in complaining about it if it's not probably going to change. So that's neither here nor there, obviously. But I agree that obviously I think Jaren Jackson and Drew Holiday were the two biggest surprises to I think almost everyone. I'm not really sure if like with the 7 reserves, if it's like a clear like position, like they want trying to get like the certain amount of guards, forwards, and centers or whatever, or if it's just like the 7 best players that weren't starters. I'm not really sure if there's anything clear on that. But I definitely thought that De'Aaron Fox should have made it in the West over Jaren Jackson. The problem with Anthony Davis obviously is he missed so many games, so that's the problem with him obviously making the All-Star game. But then Jaren Jackson missed like the first like month and a half or whatever of the season too. So I'm not really just too much sure about that. And then in the East, I think that Harden with the number 3 team in the East should have made it over Drew Holiday. Obviously the Hawks aren't doing as well as most expected so far this year, but still, I think the Trae Young should be in it over Drew Holiday. You mentioned Brunson as well as also in the conversation, but I wasn't sure if both him and Randall would make it. I think it was going to be one or the other. So, that's how that played out. But other than that, I guess Paul George missed a lot of time, so I was a little bit surprised about him making it, but. It's hard to imagine both him and Kawhi, not making, even though they've sat out like what seems like half the season. I don't know the exact, numbers or anything, but kind of going through it, there wasn't too many other surprises or anything. In terms of reserves, in terms of starters, you mentioned. Embiid, Tatum, I thought should have been the starter. They have the best record in the league, and he's the best player on the team. So I thought maybe over Durant, like you mentioned, he's missed quite a bit of times. But, Durant was going to get voted as a starter just for popularity and all that, obviously. So, like you said, every year there's going to be snubs and there's going to be players that are surprises. That's kind of the way it goes. That could be interesting if they were to kind of expand maybe a few more spots, on each side on the roster, but I'm not sure how realistic that would be and whatnot. So that's kind of my take. I think it's February 19th. So a little over 2 weeks is when they're choosing the teams. And then I guess that's the week or
I think that's all-star weekend in Utah.
Because February 19th is a Sunday, so is it the next weekend is the actual All-Star stuff, or is it that night is the game?
I'm pretty sure it's that night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is because it goes from the 17th to the 19th. Yeah, that's that whole weekend.
Oh yes. I guess then they are picking the teams, right before the game, so that'll be cool to see how that plays out. So yeah, that's just a couple weeks away. So I guess now we'll transition just to the standings where they're currently at right now. In the East, you have outside of the play in the top 6, you have Boston, Milwaukee, Philly, Brooklyn, Cleveland, Miami, and then in the play-in 7 through 10, you have the Knicks, Hawks, Wizards, and Bulls, and then you have the Pacers, you have the Raptors, who are both right outside of the play-in in the East. And then in the West, you have the top 6, the Nuggets, Grizzlies, Kings, Mavericks, Clippers, Timberwolves. Currently in the play-in 7 through 10, you have the Suns, Jazz, Warriors, and Pelicans. And then right outside of the play-in, you have the Blazers, Lakers, Thunder, and the West. Korea, who are some of the teams that I guess have, surprised you so far? Maybe some teams that you expect to maybe fall off the second half of the season or pick it up or, vice versa?
Yeah. I'm looking at the East right now, and, I'm definitely not surprised with that top 4. That top 4 is definitely the top 4 teams in the East. You have Boston, Milwaukee, Philly, and Brooklyn. I feel like, it's kind of a race to the finish right now, to the top. I feel like, with Boston right now, a little bit of a 2-game edge over Milwaukee, and then, Philly right behind them, and then so is Brooklyn. I feel like that's going to be a race to the finish because, Boston, I feel like they're just getting better and better. They're playing well basketball. Obviously, Smart is doing his thing. Brogdon as that key piece off the bench has been really, really key for this Boston team. Milwaukee, obviously, I feel like it's the Giannis show. It's the Giannis Antetokounmpo show, and, he does it well. And that's what they did in that 2021 season when they went all the way to the finals and won. Then Philly, I feel like, if Embiid keeps playing the way he is playing right now, who is going to stop him? And the only big question about this Philly team is, which James Harden are we going to see in the playoffs? Because James Harden in the regular season is always an MVP candidate, one of the best shooters of all time, always consistently, a great shooter. But then you see James Harden in the playoffs, and he is the exact opposite. He disappears. He is inexistent. There are wanted posters looking for James Harden because he doesn't know how to shoot the ball in the playoffs. And then for Brooklyn, the only thing that's stopping Brooklyn is Brooklyn. Like that's literally like when you look at this Brooklyn team, right? You see Kevin Durant, who's injured. You see Kyrie, obviously with his whole media antics and whatever. And then, it's sad to say, but I really forget Ben Simmons is on that team because he doesn't contribute anything. He doesn't do anything for that team. And so you look at those 4 teams, right? And I definitely see that, if Milwaukee and like Philly right now were to go in a second round series, I would take Milwaukee as well. And then for Brooklyn, Boston, the rematch, I definitely would take Boston all day. So for those 4 teams, I definitely expect those 4 teams to be the best in the conference. Right now, a sneaky 5th, obviously, would be Cleveland. I feel like, the way Donovan Mitchell, that 70-point game back, it was a sad day, obviously, with the whole DeMar Hamlin situation. It's kind of crazy that, the fact that Donovan Mitchell dropped 71 is being covered up. But, the way he's been balling out too, even in the game yesterday when he got ejected because Dylan Brooks decided to do Dylan Brooks things. And, it's awesome to see how Donovan Mitchell is really blossoming. I know Knicks fans are so upset right now. And, it's hard to see, but the Knicks are definitely right there as well. I feel like they're kind of one of the bigger surprises for me this year. I really did not expect Jalen Brunson to really be one of the missing pieces. I'm not going to say the missing piece because, there's still definitely some missing pieces for this Knicks team. But, Jalen Brunson has definitely been a big contributor for this team after playing for Dallas last year. A lot of people were questioning whether or not Jalen Brunson deserves all the money that the Knicks were going to give him. Obviously, the Knicks were tampering and all that stuff, and they got fined for it and they got punished for it. But still, the way Brunson is producing right now, I feel like they are one more piece away from really being a top team in the East. And maybe that's a trade, maybe that's someone in the offseason. Who knows what it is? But the Knicks are definitely right there. And Julius Randle continues to play this way. I feel like the Knicks can be a fun matchup in the first round. Not like the Atlanta year when Atlanta beat them in 5 games. I'm talking about an actual first round fun matchup. So I definitely say the Knicks are definitely one more of my surprising team. My disappointing team is the team right behind them, and that's Atlanta. Because this Atlanta Hawks team, right? We've seen what Trae Young has done. The thing about Atlanta is that they are literally the most mid team in basketball. We saw that post yesterday that the Hawks are literally at 500. They have the same record against the West teams. They have the same record against the East teams at 500. Trae Young is sitting in 8th out of 15 teams. The Atlanta Hawks are sitting 8th out of 15 in the East. They have allowed the same amount of points as they have scored. I don't know how more mid you can be this season if you are the Atlanta Hawks. And they gave up the haul for DeJounte Murray. Obviously, that was the big offseason acquisition. How are Trae and DeJounte going to coexist together? And, it's not what we were expecting, right? And there is plenty of disappointment to go around. Yes, when you have your third guy is DeAndre Hunter, right? And he's not really doing what you expected. And then obviously there's a whole John Collins situation where he's going to be traded soon. I'm really disappointed to see this Atlanta Hawks team who looked like they were taking that next step this offseason, looking like what they were last season, just a team that's going to finish in the play-in and maybe win a couple games, and everyone's talking about, oh, don't forget Atlanta, they're going to be scary, and then they don't do anything in the playoffs, and then they go home. So Atlanta is definitely a disappointing team this year at the East. Going to the West now, surprise of the year, Sacramento. I don't think anyone had excuse me. I don't think anyone had Sacramento being in 3rd place in the West around the All-Star break. You could ask everybody. I don't even think Sacramento fans had that belief. I truly believe that Sacramento will actually make the playoffs this year. I really do think that. I really like what the Sacramento team is doing. The whole light the beam thing and all that, whatever. That's a side of it. But still, the fact that you have De'Aaron Fox, who's a snub again, who's dropping 24, Domantas Sabonis has been doing well. Obviously, Harrison Barnes has been a key guy. Kevin Huerter, Malik Monk, and then there's young star and Keegan Murray. This team is young. And, we were taught there's when you look back at that trade, right? The Domantas Sabonis trade when they sent Hield and Halliburton over to Indiana, you kind of look at that trade and you see, this trade really worked out for both teams evenly. Even though the records don't show it, the fact that Domantas Sabonis is an all-star in his first season, first full season, in Sacramento, and then Tyrese Halliburton makes his first ever all-star game in Indianapolis. This Sacramento team is fun to watch. They are very offensively skilled. I feel like they definitely bring a lot of that firepower. Just explosive plays. They can get in a battle and they can win those battles. And I feel like this is the year that the tide is starting to turn with the Sacramento team. So I really like what Sacramento's doing. In terms of teams that disappointed, obviously, I have to include my Warriors in this, and it's a shame that I have to because I love them so much, even though they're literally at 500 like the Atlanta Hawks are. But it's just because this team cannot win on the road. They don't know how to win on the road. They are dominant at home, only 7-20 on the road. I believe that's one of the worst in the league. I believe that's bottom 10 in the league on the road, which is horrible. And I believe the Warriors, if they really want to at least try to make a run at the title this year, there's been rumors of a trade. Me personally, I believe that they should get in a trade. It's a shame, but that James Wiseman pick is really coming to bite this Warriors team in the butt because James Wiseman was the right pick, but LaMelo was the better pick overall, and he went third to Charlotte. And we know how Charlotte's doing. I mean, my God, they suck. But I mean, they're in the Wembanyama race. But anyways, Phoenix as well. Phoenix and Golden State definitely been disappointing this year. After two teams that were at the top of the conference not even a year ago, right? Golden State was the number 3 seed. The Phoenix Suns were, the number 1 seed, and they had all the momentum, and it was looking so good for this Phoenix Suns team, to potentially come back next year and avenge their loss. But I mean, my goodness, they really, really missed Devin Booker, and it shows. I mean, Booker's been out for so long just with that injury, and it really shows how really big of a contribution Devin Booker brings to this team, which is another snub, I believe. I believe Devin Booker is not a snub in terms of his stats, but just in terms of what he brings to the Suns team, because he's literally the MVP of the team, right? Because, he's the only one that's averaging over 20 a game. He's averaging 27. And, it's a shame to see how much of a step back this Suns team has taken without Devin Booker on the floor. So definitely the two most disappointing teams out of the West, I'd say the Suns and the Warriors. But another surprising team that I say, has broken the expectations after their trades, the Utah Jazz. I mean, everyone thought the Utah Jazz were going to be tanking for Wembanyama after they traded away Mitchell and Gobert for all those picks and, all those players alongside. But, the Utah Jazz have actually built themselves a pretty decent roster. I mean, yes, it's not playoff contending and, they may not even make it to past the play-in, but I mean, the fact that Markkanen's dropping 24 right now, and then Jordan Clarkson, he's obviously always going to be a 6 Man of the Year candidate, and he's dropping 20. Sexton is starting to get his game back going, and, I really like the future of what Utah brings. And right now, I feel like it's bright. Especially if you want to build it around Markkanen and how he has really just taken his game to the next level this year. But, there's been so many rumors about Utah potentially trading as well. So I guess we'll just have to see what Utah really does before the trade deadline for this Jazz team. And then obviously the final disappointing team. It's a reoccurring theme every year. Say it with me now. The Los Angeles Lakers. They always will be disappointing because LeBron can't do it by himself, right? He is consistent. I mean, we are literally so close to seeing LeBron pass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to become the all-time leading scorer. We're about 2-3 games away, right? And this Lakers team is not even in the playoffs right now. It's because of how inconsistent the play around LeBron James is. I mean, Davis, that man is made of glass, and we know this. Russell Westbrook, yes, he's a six-man candidate, but they need a shooter. They need a consistent guy who they can go to and say, this guy's going to get a bucket, and his name is not LeBron James. His name is blah, 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 or whatever the name is. And so I feel like the Lakers are in this position where not only do they need, excuse me, not only do they want to make the trade, they need to make a trade to kind of save their season because they're going to be in this battle for, 10th, 11th, 12th place with Portland and New Orleans and then New Orleans, talk about a team that fell off. I mean, my goodness. New Orleans at the top of the conference, and then they slid all the way down to 10th. Yes, I mean, yes, they're on a 10-game losing streak, so that's fair to them. But yes, I believe that Portland has a lot loose to play for. Obviously, after giving up CJ McCollum, and they really built the franchise around Dame pretty successfully with Anthony Simons. Mr. I'm kissing the rim himself. If you remember the dunk contest, he's playing really well along with Jeremy Grant, who they're going to give big money to. And then obviously Dame Dollar, the main guy, the co-star, the star of the Portland Trailblazers. So I mean, you look at the West right now, right? And I say the two. I mean, it's pretty wide open. It's really weird to say that the West is wide open, but it is because when you see this Warriors team lurking in the play-in, and you have this Suns team when they get Devin Booker lurking in the play-in, they're going to be scary for like a 2-seed like Memphis, who say this 2-seed Memphis has to play the Warriors in the first round as a 7-seed. I would take the Warriors winning that in 6 all day, easily, and say Phoenix has to play Denver in the first round. A healthy Devin Booker, that would be one of the more intriguing matches. I think that series would go to 7. I really do. And look, the West is a lot more wide open, but I feel like the Lakers are definitely a trade away from actually putting themselves into the conversation. And then you look at this Warriors team, they're the same way. Phoenix is looking to get Booker back and healthy. New Orleans, I don't know what's going on. I mean, for God's sake, they've lost 10 straight games. They can't figure it out. So, I feel like the West is a lot more wide open. And then you look at the East, and the East is going to be somewhere in the top 4, making it to the NBA Finals, in my opinion, as we get closer to the All-Star break. Ari?
No, yeah, I mean, obviously you covered most of it. The one team that I think has been the biggest disappointment in the East is the Raptors. Going from the 5 seed in the playoffs last year to now the 12 seed, not even in the play-in. Right now they're 2 games back of the Bulls, who are the last play-in spot. So obviously there's still, plenty of time for them to, kind of climb their way into the play-in. But like the Warriors, they're like a completely different team on the road than at home. They're, I believe, 8-18 on the road, 15-12 at home, so a completely different team, away from Toronto. But yeah, other than that, there's not too many huge surprises. I mean, Timberwolves is disappointing, but they've kind of turned it on as of late, and they're still missing Cat for the last I don't even know how long he's been out for a month and a half or something. So when he gets back, they'll be even better, obviously. Like you said, the Warriors and Suns in the play-in could be dangerous if they're fully healthy. But like you said, also the Warriors' struggles on the road is pretty noticeable. I think defensively they're missing a guy like Gary Payton a lot, on the defensive side of the ball. And then, you have the Blazers and Lakers right outside the play-in in the West, who could both sneak in. I mean, obviously the Jazz have been, really good this year, but they are a team that I think could slip for a Portland or a Lakers potentially. Um, yeah, there's not too much else that I was going to go over. But we have the trade deadline next week, next Thursday, I believe. So next week we'll kind of go over some of the rumors. I know Zach LaVine's kind of been in the rumors of trade potentially. OG Anunoby, you mentioned John Collins potentially. So there should be at least a handful of kind of bigger name players. I think dealt at the deadline, was obviously along with the smaller kind of role players that we see every year. So we'll kind of go over the rumors with that early next week, and then later next week, once the deadline is passed, we'll go over what went down and kind of how that kind of shapes up teams who made moves for buying at the deadline, selling, and all of that. So we'll close here with some college basketball talk. Looking at the current top 25, we have the usual names at the top: Purdue, Tennessee, Houston, Alabama, Arizona, Virginia. I think Kansas State's been one of the bigger surprises. They're right now number 7. You got Kansas, UCLA, Texas, Baylor, Gonzaga, Iowa State. We've had some mid majors. You had College of Charleston, who just got bumped out, but they were up to I think 18 last week. You have Florida Atlantic, who had their 20-game winning streak broken yesterday by UAB. San Diego State's in there. You don't have UNC in there, who basically brought back their entire team from last year, who made the run to the championship. You have a couple of big East teams. Xavier, who's led by Sean Miller. You have Providence. UConn, Marquette. So there's just been a lot of kind of mix up. Even though Purdue only has 1 loss, even them against more athletic bigs, I think they could cause some trouble. Against Edey down low. So I think March Madness is going to be completely wide open. We've seen so many different number 1 ranked teams throughout this year, top 5, top 10, top 25 teams this year. Even team you also had New Mexico that was top 25 as a mid major. So there's just a lot of parity with changes in rankings every week. Even Tennessee, who's number 2 right now, lost to Florida earlier in the week, so they'll obviously drop as well. So just a lot of changes in the top 25 that's gonna make the March Madness that much more fun with no kind of clear dominant number 1 team. Purdue plays at Indiana on Saturday tomorrow, and so that could be a potential Purdue, another game that they could drop, or at least a close game. So that's kind of my take so far, Korea. What kind of have you seen in the college basketball world so far this year?
Yeah, it's been a very, very interesting year for college basketball. A lot of unexpected, teams that you didn't really think, like a New Mexico, Charleston, Florida Atlantic, these mid-major schools who are really making noise off of their long winning streaks. And, I feel like Charleston, that fluke loss to, I think it was Hofstra, last week, they shot I think 10% from 3. And, I feel and they only lost by 4, and it was a home game. So I feel like that could go any other way.
They did lose to Drexel yesterday, Charleston, so they could be sliding a bit.
Yeah, that is true. They could be sliding. I still feel like they're definitely going to be a team that you really got to watch out for in March, alongside. And then I'm looking at the game yesterday. They shot 21% from 3. I feel like this team lives or die by the 3, and Charleston really wants to be a little more consistent, just shoot the ball better from 3. But in the games where they do shoot well, they're definitely dangerous. I feel like they're definitely going to be one of the scarier teams to watch out for. If you are one of the bigger schools like Indiana or something in the first round, if you match up with them. You look at the top 25, right, and you don't see any UNC or Duke. And, obviously that's the big game this week. And obviously tomorrow, the rivalry renews, Duke, UNC. It's crazy to think that both of these teams who are at the preseason, I think they were both at least top 10 in the preseason rankings. And, now they're not even in the top 25. And I believe Duke is around like a 6-7 seed, and UNC is around that same line, 7-8, like last year when they went on that incredible run. And so it's crazy to see how much college basketball has evolved because of the better play throughout pretty much the whole league, or pretty much all the conferences. I definitely say that you look outside, you look in this top 10, right? And I definitely can say that Purdue is vulnerable, as you mentioned, because, you have a matchup where Edey, can't really, defend well, or he has trouble defending because of his size inside. And, that's definitely, and I feel like any Big Ten team right now is just vulnerable because, they play so close to each other. The Big Ten is always one of these conferences we say is so good, but they just constantly beat each other up, right? And Purdue is the only kind of consistent team that is winning in that conference. And it also puts into question on whether or not the Big Ten is good. And, there's that question, but then you have Tennessee and Alabama, who have emerged as two pretty strong favorites outside the SEC who look really good. Tennessee, they play great defense. They're pretty much the best defensive team in the country, I would say, alongside with Vescovi and what they do. But it's what they do defensively. Obviously they had that bad loss on the road where they just could not get anything going against Florida. In terms of any offense, they were shooting 29% or 28% from the field and 20% from three. I mean, you're not going to win any game when you're shooting below 30 in any category. So, they're definitely vulnerable to the fluke losses as well. But, I still feel like this Tennessee team is one of the favorites to win the SEC alongside Alabama, who definitely had a bad loss against Oklahoma last week. But, at the same time, this Bama team, they have a very, very good offense, really much led by the freshman Brandon Miller, who averages about 19 a game, which is ridiculous. And, I'm excited to see it. I know Alabama and Tennessee play one more time this season. I'm really excited for that matchup because that's going to be a top 25 matchup. Top 10, top 5. What am I talking about? Top 5. And then you see Houston, right? And they're kind of the outlier because they play in a weaker conference. And, but Houston is one of the best teams I feel like this year. They've been consistent. They've had some games where, I don't know if this team is for real, but I still feel like Houston is definitely going to be one of the favorites to cut down the nets, ironically, in Houston. So I feel like if this is any story setup this year, right, to see who's going to win March Madness, I feel like Houston, one of the best teams in best teams in college basketball, alongside with the fact that they play great defense led by Kelvin Sampson. They still have Marcus Sasser, who is a Naismith Player of the Year candidate, alongside Jarace Walker. I feel like this Houston Cougar team can definitely make some noise in March. And then you look at the rest of the top 25. I like Kansas State. I like the story of Kansas State. Obviously with what's his name? Oh my God,
Deontay Johnson.
Yes, yeah, Keontae Johnson and his incredible comeback story and how he's literally playing to the level that Florida saw in him before that tragic collapse on the court, and he is coming back and he's doing his thing in Kansas, in Manhattan, Kansas. So great story great story for him alongside Marquis Nowell. That duo for K-State has been really, really good. And, they've definitely risen to the top just because of how well they played. I don't know if they can play this way consistently throughout the year, but, in a good Big 12 conference, it's really good to stack up those quality wins. And they've done that. They've split the season with Kansas. They still have potentially a matchup in the Big 12 championship. We'll see next month, but it's definitely going to be fun to really delve in more and see the rest of the top 25 and see how some of these mid majors look, because you have some of these, like you talk about New Mexico and the Mountain West, and they are definitely a team that can get 5 teams in. It's crazy to say this because it's the Mountain West Conference, but they have a legitimate shot to get 5 teams in. Boise State's playing great. San Diego State's still one of the best teams in this conference. Utah State's been playing really well as well. Nevada has that long home game winning streak. New Mexico is about to reach their 20th win of the season. I feel like those 5 teams out of the Mountain West can definitely make some noise against, like a Michigan State or potentially like a Maryland in the first round or whoever they have match up with. Also, another mid-major, St. Mary's. They're doing a great job.
Big game tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, big game against the Zags at home tomorrow. That'll pretty much be to see who will win the conference, because I don't know if that's their first meeting, but I'm pretty sure
it's their first. I'm pretty
sure.
Yeah,
I was about to say I'm pretty sure that's the first meeting. The second one later. I think it's the last game of the season for St. Mary's and Gonzaga up here in Spokane. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what this Gonzaga team can do on the road, because I've been obviously being in the Spokane area, I may have a little bit of an influence on this Gonzaga team, so I know a little bit more. And they've been playing a lot. They've been playing their most recent games. They have been really, really inconsistent. This team has not looked as dominant as last year. They played a really close game against a bad Pacific team where they, went up 90 points and their defense could not stop. But, they did just enough to get the win on the road. They had that bad loss to LMU. And, they had that buzzer beater against BYU, where I believe it was, I forgot who made the game-winning shot for Gonzaga. Oh, my God. What's his name? I know his name. Oh, Strawther. Yeah, he made that game-winning 3. This Gonzaga team has looked different. And, it's always been, can Gonzaga win a national championship under Mark Few? The talent is there, right? But I just don't know because I feel like if the window of opportunity was to open, I feel like last year would have been that window. They were the number 1 seed overall. They had Holmgren and Timmy and Nem, I think both Nemhards, and alongside Schroeder. They had a complete team before Andrew obviously went and declared for the draft, and Ryan transferred. So I feel like Gonzaga is definitely going to be a team that, can definitely make it to the Sweet 16, but I don't know if past that, just because of, the level of play that's going to be elevated once they get to the Sweet 16. You look at the Big East and you see pretty much most of the teams being in that 3 to 4 seed range, with Marquette, Xavier, under Sean Miller. He's having a great year for those Musketeers. Providence, they're back in there. UConn is still in there. And, I feel like March Madness is going to come down to – it always comes down to, who has always been the most consistent teams, right, throughout the whole season. And, you can say that, because a team has a good late stretch that they're going to have a good season. We saw Iowa and Kentucky last year. They had great stretches toward the end of the regular season. They get bounced in the first round. And, as we get closer and closer, we'll give you a lot more tips about brackets and March Madness and all that stuff. But, looking at this top 25 right now, it's definitely intriguing to see the top 10, because I feel like someone in this top 10 is going to win. And I feel like you can even stretch it down to potentially even this top 8. And I love just this time of year, watching college basketball, seeing some of these big matchups in and outside the conference, as we get closer and closer to March Madness. But, right now, Arizona, obviously, they're a very, very good team. Had a bad loss to the Cougs earlier in the season. Just had to throw that shot in there, Ari. No disrespect whatsoever. But, they've been one of the more consistent teams in the Pac-12 alongside UCLA. They are the top 2 teams. We had that battle between those 2 teams. I think it was literally last week where 2 weeks ago, where UCLA, really struggled on the road. Arizona held on for the home win in a very slow scoring game. Usually not good for ASU, for U of A, but in a game against UCLA where their defense stepped up, I definitely feel like this Arizona team is, a contender as well. As we say again, with Tubelis doing his thing, obviously a lot more about that. But looking at this top 25, I definitely would say that the top 10 has, I'd say, a little bit of an edge in terms of cutting down the nets in Houston this year. And I'm excited to see what the rest of the matchups look like. You talked about it. There's a big game tonight between Boise State and San Diego State, top 2 teams in the Mountain West. And then tomorrow you talked about We have some big games. Auburn, Tennessee, Purdue, Indiana, Texas, Kansas State. That's a big game. Gonzaga, St. Mary's. That's a game for the West Coast Conference crown. I'm excited.
Kansas, Iowa State too.
Yeah, exactly. Kansas, Iowa State. Now we're getting to this point where, these games that look like, you should win, you have to win. And, it's just that time of year. March Madness is going to be right around the corner. I'm excited. But yeah, right now, the top 25, I'd say, the top half, I'd say the top 10 are where you're going to find, your potential NCAA tournament winners.
Yeah. Can you hear me? It looks like I'm lagging out on the video.
No, I can hear you. You're good. You're good.
Just making sure. Yeah, I mean, Arizona's had, 3 pretty bad losses to Utah, Washington State, and Oregon. But after the last Oregon loss, like 3 weeks ago, Tommy Lloyd made a change in the starting lineup, moving Pelle Larsson back to a 6-man role from last year, and Cedric Henderson to the starting lineup, and they've ripped off 5 wins in a row since then. So that's kind of changed. Not changed their season, but kind of got them back on track, because at that point, a lot of Arizona fans here in Tucson were saying a lot of crazy things about about the team. So, but I mean, that's kind of every fan base, to a different extent. But yeah, I mean, like we said, March Madness should be a lot of fun. There's not really one clear kind of dominant team. There's teams like Houston and Tennessee that have really good defenses, but their offenses can be a bit inconsistent at times. And you have teams that have really good offenses and not so good defenses, and you have like a mix of that and all of that. So we're about like a month away from conference tournament time, and then like a month and a half or so away from March Madness. So as we get closer, week by week, we'll kind of be updating you all and kind of updating our takes and all that on all things NBA and college basketball. So I think that will do it for today's episode. Thank you all for tuning in. Please be sure to like, subscribe if you guys haven't already. And we hope you all have a great